Ever wondered how a man with chronic illness revolutionized science through a deceptively simple daily routine? Dive into the untold story of Charles Darwin's minimalist mastery, where walks in the woods sparked evolutionary breakthroughs and quiet reflection birthed on the origin of species. If you're hooked on tales of genius born from simplicity, subscribe now to unlock more inspiring narratives that transform your own life, one routine at a time. The story. In the quiet English countryside of Shropshire, where the rolling hills whispered secrets to the wind, young Charles Darwin first felt the pull of the natural world. Born in 1809 to a wealthy family, Charles was not the prodigy his father expected. Robert Darwin, a prominent physician, despaired over his son's lackadaisical approach to studies. "You care for nothing but shooting, dogs, and rat catching," he once scolded, "and you will be a disgrace to yourself and all your family." But beneath that boyish exterior lay a mind as vast as the oceans he would later traverse. It was here, amid the hedgerows and streams, that Charles began to cultivate what would become his impressive minimalist routine, a disciplined yet unassuming framework that propelled him from aimless youth to the architect of modern biology. As a child, Charles's days were unstructured, filled with explorations that seemed frivolous but planted the seeds of curiosity. He collected beetles, observed birds, and pondered the intricacies of earthworms wriggling through the soil. These early habits were minimalist by necessity. With no formal schedule, he relied on the rhythm of nature itself. Mornings might find him wandering the family estate, notebook in hand, sketching leaves or noting the behavior of insects. Afternoons were for reading whatever books he could pilfer from his father's library, tales of adventure that fueled his dreams of far-off lands. Evenings brought quiet reflection by the fireside, where he mulled over the day's discoveries. This simplicity, unburdened by the complexities of urban life, allowed his imagination to flourish. Little did he know, this nascent routine would evolve into the backbone of his groundbreaking work. By the time Charles enrolled at the University of Edinburgh to study medicine, his minimalist approach began to take a more deliberate shape. The bustling city was a shock after the serene countryside, but he adapted by carving out pockets of solitude amid the chaos. He rose early, before the streets filled with vendors and students, to walk along the Firth of Forth. These solitary strolls, lasting no more than an hour, cleared his mind and sharpened his observations. He avoided the excesses of student life, parties, late nights, and frivolous pursuits, opting instead for focused study sessions in the library. But medicine didn't captivate him. The dissections and lectures felt mechanical, devoid of the wonder he found in nature. It was during these years that he joined the Plinian Society, a group of natural history enthusiasts, where debates on evolution and geology ignited his passion. His routine remained sparse: walk, read, discuss, reflect. No elaborate tools or grand plans, just consistent, intentional actions that built his knowledge brick by brick. Disappointed in his son's medical progress, Robert Darwin sent Charles to Christ's College, Cambridge, to train for the clergy. Here, too, Charles's minimalist routine served him well. He befriended botanist John Stevens Henslow, whose influence was profound. Mornings were dedicated to lectures, but afternoons belonged to beetle hunting expeditions with fellow students. Charles's collection grew, each specimen meticulously labeled and catalogued in his simple notebooks. Evenings were for writing letters home or pondering theological questions that intertwined with his scientific curiosities. He graduated with a mediocre degree, but his real education came from these self-directed pursuits. It was Henslow who recommended Charles for the position that would change everything: naturalist aboard the HMS Beagle. The voyage on the Beagle, beginning in 1831, tested and refined Darwin's minimalist routine like never before. Life at sea was austere: cramped quarters, unpredictable weather, and the constant roll of waves. Yet, Charles thrived by adhering to a stripped-down schedule. He awoke at dawn to the creak of the ship, spending the first hours journaling observations from the previous day. Breakfast was simple: porridge or biscuits, eaten quickly to maximize time on deck. Mornings involved collecting specimens during shore excursions: rocks from the Galapagos, fossils from Patagonia, birds from the Falklands. He carried only essentials: a geological hammer, magnifying glass, and notebooks. Afternoons were for cataloging finds in the dim light of his cabin, often battling seasickness that would plague him for years. Evenings brought reading by lantern light, books on geology by Charles Lyell, whose uniformitarian principles challenge biblical timelines. This routine wasn't born of luxury but necessity. The Beagle's captain, Robert Fitzroy, was a disciplinarian, and the expedition demanded efficiency. Darwin's minimalism shone in how he maximized limited resources. He learned to sketch quickly, note concisely, and think deeply without distraction. On the Galapagos Islands, his walks, simple hikes through volcanic terrain, led to observations of finches and tortoises that hinted at adaptation. He didn't have laboratories or teams of assistants, just his eyes, hands, and mind. These 5 years at sea forged his routine into an unbreakable habit: observe, record, reflect. It was during quiet moments staring at the horizon that ideas about natural selection began to germinate, though they wouldn't fully bloom for decades. Returning to England in 1836, Darwin was a changed man, physically frail from illnesses contracted abroad, but intellectually ablaze. He married his cousin Emma Wedgwood in 1839, and they settled in London. But the city's noise and social demands overwhelmed him. His health deteriorated. Heart palpitations, stomach pains, fatigue. Doctors diagnosed everything from hypochondria to tropical diseases, but relief came only when he adopted an even more minimalist lifestyle. In 1842, they moved to Down House in Kent, a secluded estate where Darwin could control his environment. Here, his impressive routine crystallized into the form that would sustain him for the rest of his life. Down House became Darwin's sanctuary, a minimalist haven designed for productivity and peace. The property included gardens, orchards, and a sandwalk, a looped path through woods that became the centerpiece of his daily ritual. Darwin rose at 7 a.m., breakfasting lightly on eggs and tea with Emma and their growing family. From 8 to 9:30 a.m., he worked in his study, a room furnished sparingly, a desk, bookshelves, a microscope, and specimens. No clutter, no distractions, just focused writing or experimentation. At 9:30, he read letters, responding promptly to maintain connections with scientists worldwide without the drain of travel. Then came the first walk of the day, a short stroll around the garden to check on his plants or pigeons. Darwin bred pigeons to study variation, keeping his setup simple, basic coops and notebooks for records. By 10:30 a.m., he returned to the study for another work session until noon. Lunch was frugal: cold meat, vegetables, perhaps a glass of wine, eaten with the family in the dining room. Afternoons brought rest, a nap on the sofa, listening to Emma read novels aloud. This downtime was crucial. Darwin's illnesses demanded recovery periods, turning minimalism into a health strategy. At 3 p.m., another work block until 4:30, followed by the highlight, the sandwalk. This quarter-mile loop, flanked by trees he planted himself, was where Darwin did his deepest thinking. He walked alone, rain or shine, kicking stones to count laps, 3 for shorter thoughts, 5 for complex problems. It was here that he puzzled over transmutation of species, mentally debating evidence from fossils, geography, and breeding. The walk embodied his minimalism. No notes, no companions, just movement and mind. Evenings were for family, games with children, music on the piano, before retiring early. This routine, clockwork in its simplicity, allowed Darwin to produce volumes of work despite chronic pain. Years passed in this rhythm, each day building on the last. In the 1840s, Darwin secretly developed his theory of natural selection, outlining it in a 1844 essay locked away for fear of controversy. His minimalist approach extended to research. He corresponded with experts rather than traveling, experimented in his greenhouse with commonplace plants like orchids and carnivorous sundews. One famous study involved floating seeds in saltwater to test dispersal, simple setups with jars and timers. His book on barnacles, published in the 1850s, was a monumental 8-year effort, all from his study desk. Minimalism meant depth over breadth. He delved deeply into few subjects, uncovering universal truths. But life tested this routine. The death of his daughter Annie in 1851 shattered him, deepening his agnosticism. Yet, he persisted, finding solace in work. By 1856, encouraged by friends like Lyell, he began expanding his essay into a book. The Sandwalk became a crucible for ideas, paces quickening with excitement over Malthusian population pressures inspiring the struggle for existence. Darwin's minimalism shone in his writing. Clear, unadorned prose that conveyed complex ideas without flourish.